and welcome to Kubernetes Community Days Bengaluru. My name is Jeffrey Sika. I'm commonly known as Jiffy across the internet, and I work at the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. I'm really happy to be here and excited to share 3 contributor stories from how they started out and where they went in their open source journey. A few tidbits. I want to keep these folks anonymous, but they are definitely not fictitious since some of them are my friends. Next, I want this to be more of a fireside chat storytelling thing, but in my case I don't have a fire and the best I've got is this bookshelf. Lastly, this is a Kubernetes Community Day, and these stories are from CNCF contributors, but the core of this talk isn't just about Kubernetes or cloud native projects. These stories and their lessons are applicable across all facets of open source contribution. So with that, let's get started and talk about the first person. At KubeCon Cloud Native Con North America 2018, it was in Seattle. Person A attended a CNCF hosted mentoring session. The CNCF, in conjunction with the community, tries to host at least one of these mentoring sessions at every KubeCon. In these sessions, there's usually a pool of mentors that get matched with a much larger pool of mentees. Once you get matched up, you sit at a table and you can ask questions that vary from how can I talk to my manager about contributing to more open source projects, to technical questions about Kubernetes API server performance. It's a wide gamut of different kinds of topics. Depending on the mentee's focus, they'll get paired with a mentor who specializes in the questions they want to discuss. After the session ended, some of the mentors and mentees stuck around to chat while deciding what sessions to attend next if we wanted to go and grab lunch, including person A. And that kind of fostered a friendship. There was a relationship there. Twitter handles were exchanged, memes were exchanged, and fast forward several months, they've wound up deep diving in Kubernetes SIG networking and helping out with PR reviews. They then went on to form one of the newer SIGs in the Kubernetes community. So that's person A's story. Now let's talk about person B and person C. They were both able to utilize Cloud Native Computing Foundation's KubeCon Cloud Native Con Scholarship Program. That's a mouthful, but now it's officially named the Dan Kahn Scholarship Fund, named after the late Dan Kahn. This fund exists to support individuals who may not otherwise have the opportunity to attend in one of 3 categories. It's either diversity, needs-based, or students. Person B and C both applied for and qualified to get travel support to a KubeCon Cloud Native Con. They'd previously both been off and on contributors to Kubernetes, but after they had each attended a contributor summit hosted at a KubeCon, this is where their stories diverge. Person B had been helping out in contributor experience, another SIG within Kubernetes. SIG means special interest group. They had been attending weekly meetings and helping take notes. Sometime later, they branched out to help with the Kate's Infra Working Group, which is a working group tasked with migrating the Kubernetes project off of Google-owned infrastructure and onto community-owned infrastructure. They are now one of the GitHub project admins for Kubernetes. This is one of the highest trusted positions, as it is what it says. You have admin rights over all of the Kubernetes orgs and repos. Now on to person C. They had a very similar path. They were helping out in contributor experience, but soon started helping organize a contributor summit. They were shadowing one of the previous heads of registration. They eventually became the head of registration themselves. They also went on to join the Kubernetes release team as a shadow. They then became a release lead for one of the Kubernetes versions, and they are now also a GitHub project admin. I am honestly humbled and honored to know these people. They're incredible. But something to keep in mind, they all started somewhere. Another thing, These three all leverage programs offered by the CNCF, but they do have a lot more in common. If you want to be a successful open source maintainer, regardless of technical ability, you need to focus on three things: consistency, communication, and consistency with communication. In my opinion, those are the three core things to be a successful open source contributor. So what do I mean by consistency? Contributors that show up, do a bunch of large PRs, and then kind of fade away. That's what we need sometimes to push a project forward, but that's not sustainable. To be a maintainer of an open source project, you need to be consistent. And it doesn't have to be large tasks. If you sit down and say, I'm going to do one PR a week, or I'm going to do one PR review a week, over the course of a year, you've done 52 PRs or PR reviews, and you maintain that consistency. The community notices just collectively because you are there and you are showing up repeatedly, even if it's over time. So communication, everyone will say you need to strive to be a good or a better communicator. This is just saying things like, hey, I've been contributing for the last 3 months. Things are happening right now with my personal life. I need to, take 3 weeks off. I'm not going to be at the meetings. Or things like, hey, I'm getting a bunch of free time, and I know that there is this effort that the project is wanting to try and push forward. I should be able to commit, say, 10 hours a week to it. And likewise, something's come up, I need to back out. It's not just the ability to communicate, it's also being open with the community on what you are capable, not capable of doing, what you have time for, and when you need to step back. Being able to communicate to the project lets the project move around and adapt and actually benefits everyone as a whole. And then consistency with communication. Falling off of the face of the planet and not letting anyone know, if you wind up being in a elevated position of power, can cause massive problems when it comes to organizing efforts in an open source project. So simply being able to communicate no matter what, hey, I need to step back, or hey, I have a bunch of time, or hey, I think that the project could go in a different direction. It's all about just being able to openly voice and openly comment and openly allow people to kind of get inside your head. So contributing to open source is relatively easy. Projects get so-called drive-by contributors all the time, whether it's fixing a bug that user ran into, or someone thinks they found a spelling mistake in a random markdown file. The hurdle is becoming a so-called maintainer, not just a contributor. Sometimes those are interchangeable, but a contributor is someone that has just submitted a PR and had it merged. A maintainer is someone that continues coming back. They're a community member. And becoming a community member, that's where those 3 C's come in. So becoming a maintainer of an open source project is difficult, and it takes time, it takes effort, and it takes trust on the part of others in the project. But it is incredibly gratifying to feel that trust and to see your efforts shape and affect a project that's used by many. So with that, I hope that I haven't disheartened you. I've actually excited you, made you more curious and more eager to go and try and become an open source maintainer. I will say that it is not for everybody, but I think it is, again, one of the most gratifying things you can strive to be. With that, I normally keep my talks kind of shorter so that I can interact with the crowd and ask questions, or rather have questions asked and then answer them, and can't really do that right now. However, I do have 3 questions that I am frequently asked when it comes to talking about becoming an open source contributor and what it takes to be a maintainer, things like that. So I figured I would tackle those just kind of right off the bat. The first one is, how can I start? That's actually the easy part. There are, with many different open source projects, open issues. More established projects will have issues that are labeled a first good issue or new contributor, and those are anything from simple spelling mistakes that or docs issues that people have noticed to more bite-sized chunks. When it comes to your first issue, you should try not to say that you're going to deliver the moon. Instead, you usually want to start slow, and you want to start small, and you want to start with something you know you can achieve, and then slowly but surely take a larger bite and a larger bite. Because it, again, establishes you as a community member that wants to stick around, but also it builds your own confidence and builds your own kind of knowledge base, because it just takes time. Especially the larger the code base, not everyone knows everything about a project usually, especially the larger projects. So usually starting small, starting with something that you're interested in. If you're interested in networking, go look in a networking specific part of a project. If you are interested in technical writing, we need more technical writers. Everyone needs docs to be improved. So that's where I would say start off first. So that actually leads into a next common question that I get. What if I'm not a technical person? Well, first off, there is still plenty to do. If you want to contribute, docs is usually where I send people, because everyone knows a language. Everyone should be able to take these technical concepts and then apply them. And if they can't, there might be something wrong with the docs. Likewise, if you are bilingual, being able to translate docs between languages is a massive, massive win for a project, because it'll increase adoption, and it also grows the potential contributor base by increasing adoption. One thing that is never overstated is the need for good documentation and good technical writers. The last thing that I want to kind of comment on, and this is going to kind of be freeform, but a lot of people ask, what happened? How can I become an open source contributor when I don't have a lot of time? How can you make your hobby also be your job? Or what happens if your hobby is also your job? Does that mean the hobby goes away? These are questions that actually lead to a rather serious topic called burnout. Burnout, for those that don't know, is kind of hard to describe. So I'm going to try off the cuff. Whenever you are passionate about something, think like a project that you're just kind of hacking on, and then all of a sudden you feel like you don't want to do anything. Or you're at work, and it's not just like a lack of motivation, but it's also just a lack of clarity, the inability to focus on something, or just simply being throwing your hands up in the air and saying, I can't, I'm done. When we have very technical and kind of highly cognitive careers and jobs, we are very, very susceptible to burnout. And it's kind of what it sounds like. Candles burnt out. It's hard to motivate yourself. It's hard to, you're in a rut, you're in a pit, and you're trying to dig yourself out, but you don't have a shovel. It's very, very difficult. And one thing that I can say with certainty is being an open source maintainer accelerates that, like tenfold, compared to certain people that just, are engineers at large companies, but they don't contribute to open source outside of work. Being an open source maintainer and also trying to kind of double dip between your job and open source is very difficult to do over time. So that's where time management skills and just being realistic with yourself is super helpful. Being cognizant of your moods, being cognizant of just what you can and can't do, and also having a support structure in place. And this is where community comes in. There have been multiple people in the Kubernetes community that have reached out to me. Hey, are you doing okay? Are things all right? Hey, how you doing? Just simple health checks. And likewise, people have reached out to other people. And sometimes the answer is no, I'm not doing well. And that's when a conversation can come in where we can try and help other people. There's individual burnout, and that's what I'm talking about, but also making sure that a community itself doesn't burn out just through compassion and making sure that everyone else is okay. Like, that makes a community. And so that's always what we're striving to build and striving to maintain is relationships with people. Open source is code. Open source is code and docs, but open source is made by people. So we need to help nurture and make sure that these people are good, are healthy, are able to continue to contribute, able to just be the best that they can be. So that's burnout is usually something that I want to always address when it comes to how can I become an open source maintainer, because it's something that everyone is going to have to deal with at some point, and knowing about it up front and kind of being open about it is always going to help more people. And with that, that's all I have. I am so excited to have done this. This has been a blast. Like I said, I'm at Gphy everywhere on the internet. And if you have any other questions or thoughts or comments, please send them to me, because I love hearing that. I love answering questions. I just wish I could have done it, live on stage with, all of you. So thank you again, and I hope everyone has an awesome KCD. Bye-bye.